Hi everyone, and welcome to our final lesson in our An Inspector Calls GCSE revision study guide. If you haven't seen any of these videos so far, I would recommend you try and catch up with a few of them before the exam, which is coming up for most of you tomorrow. So we've covered Mr. Burling, Eric, Eva, the inspector, Gerald, Mrs. Burling, Sheila. We've done great quotes and model paragraphs on all of those characters. We've looked at capitalism versus socialism and class division. We've looked throughout really at different elements of the context of the play. We've looked at some model answers, full essays as well, and I've given some feedback and information to some of my students and people that have commented on the video. So today's lesson, final lesson, very important lesson though, as you're about to go into these exams, is some revision advice for An Inspector Calls. So in terms of revision advice, there's really 6 steps that I would recommend as you're doing your final prep. So what you want to do is you want to map out the characters and themes for what are we doing again right now? Yeah, Inspector Calls, sorry. You want to map out the characters and themes for the text. So in this case, An Inspector Calls. You want to pick a character or theme that you want to zoom in on and really refresh your memory and boost your quotes and ideas on. Today, we're going to be doing Gerald as an example. You want to write as many quotes from memory as you can for that character or theme. Don't worry if the quotes aren't perfect. You can always go back to the text or Google and look up whether you've got the exact wordage of the quote. You do want to get the quote right in the exam, obviously, but while you're just trying to remember quotes, if you can sort of half remember one, you're like, oh yeah, he said something about something. Just write what you can, right? Step 4, you find or create an extract for that character or theme. Again, you can easily Google this, or you can pick a chunk from the text if you're like, oh yeah, I remember Gerald was going on about a load of stuff in this section. You can do either. You can create one for yourself, or you can Google just Gerald Inspector Calls extract practice, whatever. Yeah, and you'll find extracts easily. Step 5, once you've got the extract and you're reading that, you find some quotes in the extract and you want to link that to the quotes that you already know for the character. And then finally, step 6, you want to try and create a list of some points which could form paragraphs for the essay that you can then write in the exam. So if you manage to get through most of the characters and most of the themes, then whatever comes up in the exam will be easy for you because you'll already have 3 or 4 paragraphs that you know you would write for that character or that theme. Okay, so I decided I've been doing these videos for basically every text this week to help. So I've done this already on Lord of the Flies and Macbeth and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde and so on. So I thought I'd challenge myself rather than having it all pre-prepared. I would actually be a bit more spontaneous and write some of this. So we're mapping out the characters and themes. So you've got Gerald, you've got Sheila, you've got Mr. Burling, you've got Mrs. Burling, you've got the inspector, you've got Eva, also known as Daisy, you've got Gerald. Now, I wouldn't really worry about doing this for Edna and Alderman Megati. I think that they're very small characters. But, you know, if you really wanted to be thorough, you could talk about them as well. But that's it, right? You've got Gerald, Sheila, so they're the couple that are engaged and they're not engaged. Mr. and Mrs. Burling, Inspector Gould. Oh, I put Gerald twice. I meant Eric here. My bad. Eva, Daisy, same person. Obviously, her real name is Eva, but she's referred to as Daisy quite a bit. Eric Burling, Edna the maid, and Alderman Megati, who is referred to quite a bit in the middle as a crop character. In terms of themes, you've got class division is a big one. You know what? I'm going to cheat. Class division. Well, no, I'm not going to cheat actually because I didn't write that many there. Class division. You've got capitalism versus socialism. You've got corruption, death. You've got transformation. You've also got generation divide. Obviously, there's a divide between the young generation and the older generation. Gerald is kind of the bridge in the middle of that. And you've also got women's rights or treatment of women, something like that. Okay, so there's a list of themes and characters that I would recommend that you think about. All of these, apart from these 2, could come up as questions in their own right. But so we're just going to focus in on Gerald. So with Gerald, the first thing you do is you try and write down as many quotes as you can actually remember for the character, okay? So one of the first quotes that I like is actually from near the end of the book, of the play. And he says, you know, it's all right, Sheila, everything's going to be okay. How about this ring? So he tries to get Sheila to recommit to marrying him towards the end. Another quote that isn't from Gerald specifically, but links to Gerald is this the ring you wanted me to have? So this is actually from, Sheila says this, but it reflects on Gerald, the idea that Sheila wants to wear an engagement ring that Gerald wants her to have. So that's very different to the way that things work today, right? I actually just proposed to my girlfriend and she said yes, and I didn't pick the ring that I wanted her to wear on her finger. I picked the ring that I thought she would want on her finger. You know, so yeah, so it's a bit odd that Gerald chooses a ring that he wants her to wear. It's just a different world in 1912, I guess. You've got the quote, we would have done the same. This is talking about how Mr. Burling fires Eva, and Gerald supports Mr. Burling's decision and says, we would have done the same. So it suggests that he and his father would also have fired Eva Smith for asking for a pay rise, which is really quite cruel. Other quotes for Gerald. It's funny, isn't it? When you're put on the spot, it is actually quite difficult. So we've also got where Gerald says, oh, I say, congratulations. So he's congratulating Mr. Burling. He's saying to Mr. Burling, congratulations, because Mr. Burling is boasting about how he's going to become a knight. He's going to be knighted, like Sir Burling and stuff like that. Other than that, we've also got that man wasn't really an inspector, or a police inspector, I think is the exact quote. And I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm still not 100% sure on the wording of some of these. So I would have to go back and check it's perfect. But obviously Gerald is the one that discovers that Inspector Gould might be a hoax, right? So that's a list of 5. I could sort of squeeze out a few more from my brains if I wanted to spend a bit longer on this, but there's 5 quotes that present Gerald in a few different ways. He's sort of controlling over his relationship here. He doesn't seem to understand that they're actually quite bad people, really, and that they probably shouldn't want to. He probably shouldn't want to get married straight away again, or think that everything's okay just because they got away with it. So lack of responsibility, and just mistreatment of the working class here. Putting focus on promotions and money and wealth and public facing stuff here, like the fact that he's so excited for Mr. Burling to get a knighthood. He's also excited about this because this means that his parents, who don't really approve of Sheila and the Burlings, will probably approve a bit more if he's Sir Burling. And then obviously the fact that Gerald uncovers things. So that does show his intelligence, but also shows that his sort of denial. So there you go. There's 5 quotes from me, but you would do the same. You would map out whatever quotes you could for the character or the theme. Then you would pick an extract. So I've picked a little extract here. I say little, it's actually quite long. So we'll just go through that and we'll see if we can get some more Gerald quotes, and we'll see if we can link those Gerald quotes to some of the quotes that I had picked here. And the other thing I suppose I should add to that is something from the extract might spark another quote that you didn't even write down. So that's good too. Like if it sparks another quote, write that down too, right? That's a huge win. So the inspector says, she talked about herself? Gerald said, yes. I asked her questions about herself. She told me her name was Daisy Renton, that she'd lost both parents, that she came originally from somewhere outside Bromley. She also told me she'd had a job in one of the works here and had to leave after a strike. She said something about the shop too, but wouldn't say which it was, and she was deliberately vague about what happened. I couldn't get any exact details from her about herself. Just because she felt I was interested and friendly, but at the same time, she wanted to be Daisy Renton. Don't know why that's not capitals. And not Eva Smith. Again, don't know why that's not capitals. In fact, I heard that name for the first time tonight. What she did let slip, though she didn't mean to, was that she was desperately hard up and at that moment was actually hungry. I made the people at the county find some food for her. So that's an interesting quote, isn't it? Because he mistreats the working class when it's his own workers in the Crofts Limited factory. But when he has a working class girl in front of him who's hungry, his instinct is human, which is I helped her get food, right? The other thing about this top bit is it's kind of ironic that Gerald clearly understands the struggle. She'd had a job of the works here and had to leave after a strike. So the fact that he's literally dated and had a relationship with a woman who had to leave because of a strike, and yet he says to Mr. Burling, you know, yeah, we would still have fired them for striking. It shows a weird sort of what we would call cognitive dissonance. There's this weird separation between, in his personal life, he helps the working class. He feels sorry for Eva Smith or Daisy Renton for what happens to her. But in his business life, he's like, nah, they're my workers. I'm going to keep going for lower costs and higher prices. So it sort of shows him as a bit of a hypocrite or a bit of a strange guy, really. Yeah. And you decided to keep her as your mistress. What? Of course, mother. It was obvious from the start. Go on, Gerald. Don't mind mother. So this bit here is obviously really sarcastic tone. It shows how Gerald's actions have broken their engagement and relationship. So there's a few more quotes for Gerald. And then Gerald, again, steadily carries on. I discovered, now the fact he's steady is actually quite a big deal as well. It links him to Mrs. Burling because Mrs. Burling is upper class and Gerald is upper class. Mr. Burling is not. And so Mr. Burling, maybe it makes a bit more sense that he's still learning how the upper class work with the authorities. J.B. Priestley suggests that, you know, there's a lot of corruption between the upper class and police enforcement. And I don't have much doubt that there probably was some corruption at that level, because if you have that much money and you're personal friends with the police and so on, then I can see how the corruption ends up happening. So Gerald is steady here, probably because he arrogantly thinks he'll get away with whatever he's done. Maybe he's also steady because he knows that nothing he's done will actually end up putting him in prison or anything. So he's just trying to tell the story as it is. I discovered not that night, but 2 nights later when we met again, not accidentally this time, of course, that in fact she hadn't a penny and was going to be turned out of the miserable backroom she had. The fact that he calls it a miserable backroom shows that he has some empathy, some sympathy for her and her situation. It happened that a friend of mine, Charlie Brunswick, had gone off to Canada, what is it, capital letters here, for 6 months, and had let me have the key of a nice little set of rooms he had, Morgan Terrace, and had asked me to keep an eye on them for him and use them if I wanted to. So I insisted on Daisy moving into those rooms, and I made her take some money to keep her going there. So again, we've got this irony, right? This irony that when he is in his personal life, he's really kind to the working class. He's kind to Eva Smith / Daisy Renton. He gives her food, he gives her shelter, he gives her money. This is all socially responsible ideas, welfare, you know, helping people get on their feet when they're unemployed, that kind of thing, which obviously we take for granted now in 2022. But back then there was no social security net. I want you to understand, I didn't install her there so I could make love to her. I made her go to Morgan Terrace because I was sorry for her and didn't like the idea of her going back to the Palace Bar. I didn't ask for anything in return. So, you know, again, he's looking out for the working class. He's being quite socially responsible here. He doesn't want to think of a young woman having to prostitute herself for the money to live. It's a horrible thing. And so he doesn't want that. And so he does what he can to help. And yet in his own business, as I said, he would not do anything to help. So there's a ton of extra quotes on Gerald from this extract. Now, obviously in the real exam, because this is a modern text, most of you will not get an extract to work from. Some of you will, so that, you know, that's how you do it. Linking it now to anything in here, I think there definitely are a few links between the quotes in the extract and the memorized quotes that I pushed out of my skull a minute ago. But the next step, so this is step 6, is to create a list of points for the character. And I think that step 5 and 6 are kind of interchangeable. You have to come up with the points for the character or theme, but you also have to then try and work out the evidence and links there. So how is Gerald presented? I think Gerald is presented as hypocritical. Gerald is presented as socially responsible when personally affected by poverty. Gerald is very confident despite his affair. He still speaks about this very confidently. We'll just do 3 for this. So then you just need some evidences. So we've really gone through this really as we've gone through, but so he's very hypocritical because he gives her money and like this quote here, right? Money and a room, and yet in his personal, in his business life, he would have fired her. You know, we would have done the same. We would have fired Eva Smith and the others striking as well. Yeah. So that shows him as quite hypocritical. Socially responsible when personally affected by poverty. You know, the fact that he empathizes with her, he understands that the back room that she lives in is very miserable. So she actually understands that. And also he doesn't like the idea of her going back to the Palace Bar, which symbolizes prostituting herself. So again, all of that shows that he is socially responsible when he sees the poverty in front of him like that. And then Gerald is very confident despite his affair. So, you know, there's a couple things in there. The fact he gives her a ring that he wants her to have to start with. The fact at the end of the play, he says, how about this ring? How about we get married? You know, he seems quite confident there. He's also confident really when he's like deconstructing Inspector Gould. That man wasn't really a police inspector. So there's some confidence there. There's several other points that you could do for Gerald that I'll just add in as a bonus. So Gerald represents hope and then tragedy. Because it seems like even though he's a very high up businessman and he's going to be someone who's the future of capitalism and business, at the beginning, it seems like he might have empathy for the working class and actually learn from it. But by the end, obviously, he turns back from that and actually sticks with capitalism and not being socially responsible. Gerald forms a bridge between the socially responsible younger generation and the socially irresponsible older generation. So there's another couple of things you could say about Gerald, and you can get quotes that support those. But those are the steps. So let's just recap that one more time. Step 1, map out your characters and themes for your text. Step 2, pick out the character or theme you're going to actually work on. Step 3, write as many quotes as you can remember about that character or that theme. Don't worry if the quotes aren't perfect, because you can always work that out later. Step 4, find or create an extract for the character or theme. You can make it yourself or you can Google it and find one very easily. If you're not sitting the exam tomorrow, you could ask your teacher perhaps as well, or tutor, or whatever. Step 5, make links between quotes in your extract and quotes in the text as a whole. And then step 6, create a list of points for the character or theme. So you have a pre-prepared list. So if Gerald did happen to come up tomorrow, I would highly recommend that you use some of these points that I've given you. He's a hypocrite, socially responsible when it affects him personally, but not otherwise, confident, hope, and then tragedy, bridge between the socially responsible youth and the socially irresponsible older generation. 5 great paragraphs that you could write, clear evidence, and then you just obviously have to put in your context as well. So I hope that was helpful. Good luck with your exams. If you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. I'd love to hear from some of you. If you do well in your exams or whatever, I'd love to hear whether these videos did help you. And I hope they did. I hope we've been on a bit of a journey these last 10 weeks. So good luck and all the best.